She picked up the wrong phone by mistake. 47 songs, a playlist titled Cass Summer, and 3 songs her husband had told her, to her face, that he despised. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stood barefoot in her own kitchen, 7 months pregnant, and read 14 months of text messages in 11 minutes flat. Inside jokes, pet names, dinner reservations at restaurants he was always too tired to take her to, and then the most recent message, sent while she was home, growing his child. "You only turn 30 once. You deserve the world." She put the phone down exactly where she found it. She rinsed her spoon. She made him coffee the next morning. And then she found out something he never knew, something that would make his 50-person rooftop party the biggest mistake of his life. Because the building he rented for his mistress's birthday, her family owned it. Sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one no one bothered to see. If this story moved, you share it with one woman who has been made to feel smaller than she is. Drop a comment telling us, have you ever been completely underestimated by someone who should have known better? We read every single one, and if you're new here, subscribe. A new story drops every week, and you will not want to miss what's coming next.
Whatever you are going through, this story is a reminder that you are more than someone else's narrow perception of you. If this story moves you, please share it with a person who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell us if you have ever been underestimated by someone who should have known your worth. We read every one. The music is what exposed him. Not a fight, not a weird text message, not a smudge of lipstick, or a receipt from a place she'd never been. It was a playlist, glowing on a phone left on the kitchen island. The title was Cass Summer. It had 47 songs. Margot recognized just 3. They were songs Derek had insisted he detested. It was a Tuesday morning near the end of August. Margot was 7 months into her pregnancy. She stood barefoot at her kitchen island, one hand pressed against her aching back, her other hand holding that untouched glass of water. Sunlight poured through the window in that specific golden way that used to fill her with hope. But today, it just made the room feel harsh and overexposed, too bright to hide the truth. She grabbed the phone, mistaking it for hers. It was not. The screen was already on. Derek never locked it around her. She once considered it a sign of trust. Now she saw it for what it was, the sheer confidence of a man who never thought his wife would have a reason to look. The first thing she noticed was not the playlist. It was a text alert. The preview showed 4 words before the screen went dark. Can't wait Saturday? C. Margot put the phone down. She picked up her water and drank all of it without pausing. Then she picked up Derek's phone again. 3 times, she almost backed out. Lock, unlock, lock, unlock. Just one more time, Margot. Do not do this. Margot, what? You need to know. She opened the conversation. The sender was saved as C-work. The messages went back 14 months. She knew this because she scrolled and scrolled and kept on scrolling. She stood in that one spot for 11 minutes, reading the story of a second life her husband was living parallel to theirs. The texts were not crude. That was almost worse. They were affectionate. They had pet names, private jokes, and photos from dinners at restaurants Margot had suggested, but Derek had claimed he was too exhausted to visit. She read without taking a breath. She stood perfectly still. Then, near the top, she found the most recent exchange. C wrote, "The Rosewood rooftop is confirmed. Private buyout for Saturday. 50 guests. They are doing the Krug and the full tasting menu." Derek replied, "You are insane. You did not have to do all this." C wrote back, "You only turned 30 once. You deserve the world." Margot looked down at her swollen belly. She thought, "I am 7 months pregnant with your baby, and you are throwing a massive rooftop party for another woman." She did not weep. That would come later. At that moment, her brain did something she would later describe to her friend Patrice as going completely silent and incredibly fast all at once, like a computer processing a file too large to handle. She took no screenshots. She did not reread anything. She placed the phone back on the counter exactly as she found it, face up, same spot. Then she walked to the refrigerator for the yogurt she was about to eat for breakfast. She peeled off the foil. She ate it standing right there, staring out at the yard. The yard Derek hired a landscaper to design. The yard she paid for. That last thought was a surprise. She rarely allowed herself to think about money in their life together. Her money. The fortune she came from. She had been taught not to. Her father, Theo, had firm ideas about carrying wealth discreetly. He used to say, "The most powerful presence in a room should always be your character." She stood there barefoot, eating strawberry yogurt, and contemplating if her marriage was finished. She didn't send a text or make a call. After she ate the yogurt, she rinsed the spoon and placed it on the drying rack. That's what you do when your whole world is falling apart. You wash the spoon, set it aside to dry, and remember to breathe. When Derek came down at 7:45, already dressed for work, with his tie perfectly knotted, she had coffee waiting. She sat at the table, her laptop open, and reading glasses perched on her nose. She glanced up at him. "There is coffee," she said. He poured himself a mug, but never said a word about Saturday. He gave her a kiss on the top of her head, the kind of affectionate yet absent gesture you give someone you no longer truly see. And then he was gone. Margot shut her laptop and remained completely still for a few moments. The only sounds in the quiet kitchen were the refrigerator's hum and a distant garbage truck. She listened to the noises, letting them feel normal. Then she picked up her own phone and dialed a number she knew by heart. The phone rang twice before a man answered. "Margot, it is early." "Russell," she replied, "I need you to get the prenuptial asset schedule, and I want a complete overview of the Ellison Trust's payment calendar." A brief silence followed. "Should I ask why?" he questioned. "Not right now," she answered. "But you will soon." She ended the call. Placing a hand flat against her belly, she could feel the baby was already up and moving. It was doing that little thing she privately called knocking. It was as if her daughter instinctively knew to announce her presence. Already practicing. "I have got you," Margot whispered, not aloud, but in the deep part of her chest where words form. "No matter what happens, I have got you." Sunlight streamed through the window, bright and almost harsh, yet the feeling in the room had changed. It felt surprisingly like a new beginning instead of an end. She could not explain the sensation. She just knew it. It was the unique calm of a woman who has finally found solid ground beneath her feet, only to realize it had been there all along. She had not been completely honest with Derek about who she was when they got married. She had her reasons, and she believed they were good ones. But standing there in her kitchen, with a clean spoon in the rack and a secret as big as a mountain in her heart, she started to see things differently. The secret she kept to protect herself was about to be the very thing that would set her free. Patrice Davenport had been friends with Margot Ellison since they were sophomores at Whitmore College, 11 years ago. In those 11 years, Patrice had learned two things for sure about her best friend. One, Margot never cried in front of anyone. Two, when Margot called at 8:15 on a Tuesday morning and said, "Can I come over?" Something had gone terribly wrong. Patrice had the coffee brewing by the time Margot's car pulled up. Not the everyday coffee, but the good stuff, from the French press she saved for real emergencies, the kind that required sitting down. Margot came in, still in the clothes she'd slept in, hair tied back with a pencil, 7 months pregnant. and she walked with the heavy resolve of someone who had made a decision and was now living with it. She sat down across from Patrice at the kitchen table. She told her about the phone, the playlist, the messages, and the party. Patrice listened with a focused silence that showed she was physically stopping herself from speaking. Her jaw was set, her coffee untouched. She was in that mode she used for things that needed her full attention and control. When Margot finished, Patrice just said, "Okay, okay. How are you?" "I am fine," Margot said. "You are not fine." "No," Margot conceded, "but I am functional, which is what I need to be right now." She wanted to confess that she had known. Not these details, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. She had chalked it up to pregnancy hormones, or stress, or the fact that Derek was always unpredictable, and she married him anyway. She knew. She just did not want to be the kind of woman who was right about it. What Patrice knew about Margot's money was only part of the story. This was enough to show that Margot's upbringing was different. Her family had an estate in Connecticut. Margot's father, Theo Ellison, came from what Patrice delicately called serious old money. Yet, Margot drove a simple car, dressed in ordinary clothes, and worked as an art acquisitions consultant. She worked not out of necessity, but from a true passion for it. This was a different kind of wealth, one that had no need to show off. What Patrice was unaware of was its sheer scale, the full extent of it. She did not know why Russell Hart, a man with 3 law degrees, managing a global portfolio, would take Margot's call before 8 in the morning. Margot never mentioned, while sitting in Patrice's kitchen, that Ellison Holdings had an approximate value of $2.3 billion, or that her own trust, set up by her father, before his death 4 years prior, held 41% of it. Nor did she mention the prenuptial agreement she and Derek signed, which he had his lawyer review for a mere 40 minutes. The lawyer was found through a referral site, and Derek clearly had not understood the document's language. She kept all of this to herself because her mother, Vivian Ellison, had taught her a fundamental rule about money. You don't use it as a weapon unless you are forced to. Derek had just forced her to. Patrice asked softly how long she thought this had been happening. "The texts go back 14 months, Margot stated. 14 months. The number echoed in her head. 14 months ago, she and Derek were just back from a second anniversary trip to Portugal. She remembered having a small sunburn on her shoulders. He had bought her a blue tile from a Lisbon market, which she hung in their hallway. That tile was still hanging there. "Margot," Patrice said with care, "when did you learn you were pregnant?" 13 months ago. A complex, guarded expression crossed Patrice's face. "So he was already—" "Yes," Margot confirmed. "When I told him about the baby, he was already with her. He held me when I cried from being so scared. He said we would handle it together. He told her he was the luckiest man alive. And he was already with her." The silence in Patrice's kitchen felt heavy. The refrigerator made its low hum. Outside, a bird hit a window, then flew off. These were the normal sounds of a Tuesday morning that was anything but normal. Then Patrice spoke. "Honey, I have been holding my tongue for years." Margot looked up. There were signs, small things. "I kept thinking I was mistaken, or that I was just projecting. I told myself that Derek just had that certain—" Patrice looked for the right word. "Energy." "What things?" Margot asked. "The way he discussed your job, as if it were a little hobby to keep you from being bored, how he would talk over you at dinner. The remarks about your house, your car, the way he always acted a bit shocked when you knew something he did not." "He just thought I was being modest," Margot said. "No," Patrice answered softly. He thought you were less than what you are. There is a big difference. That statement hit Margot harder than she anticipated. She considered it for a moment, turning it over in her mind. He never suspected she was hiding a thing because he simply assumed there was nothing important to find. They let that thought hang in the air. Then Patrice asked the one question Margot was expecting. "What are you going to do?" Margot was silent for a while. She stared at her coffee cup, then at her own hands, then back at Patrice. "I am going to the party," she said. Patrice just looked at her. "Saturday," Margot explained. "The Rosewood Rooftop. 50 guests. Krug champagne. A full tasting menu. It is for a woman named Cassandra who is turning 30. Margot." "He has no idea that I know," Margot interrupted. "And I plan to keep it that way for one more week." "Why?" Margot lifted her coffee cup. The coffee was cold now, but she drank it anyway. "Because some conversations," she said, "are best had in public." Before leaving, she asked Patrice one last thing. She stood at the door, her hand on the frame, feeling the August heat. "Can I borrow that black dress, the one with the empire waist?" Patrice studied her for a moment. "The Giovanni?" "Yes, Margot. That dress cost—" "I know how much it cost," Margot said. "I was the one who insisted you buy it." The drive home from Patrice's took 22 minutes. Margot spent every one of them doing something she had trained herself for years not to do. She remembered things in detail. She recalled the very first time she brought Derek to meet her mother. Vivian Ellison greeted them at the Connecticut estate, not in the main residence, but in the garden house, which was Vivian's name for the 11-room cottage on the property. Vivian served tea and was perfectly charming. She led Derek through the rose garden, asking him polite questions about his job, his family, his future plans. Later, while Derek was using the restroom, Vivian turned to Margot and stated simply, "He does not know, does he?" It was not really a question. "No," Margot replied. "When will you tell him?" "When I am sure he loves me for who I am." Vivian gazed at her daughter for a long time with that specific look she had, the one that saw everything but only judged part of it. "That is not wisdom, Margot," she said at last. "That is fear. You understand the difference." "Yes," Margot said. "I do." She always intended to tell him. She had a whole strategy planned for after their first year together. Once they had established something solid, once she was positive. But that first year turned into a second, and the second year led to a wedding. And the wedding involved a prenuptial agreement Russell drafted so masterfully that Margot barely gave it a thought. By then, the secret was just a part of her life's foundation, a structural wall she could not tear down without the whole thing collapsing. She had not lied to Derek about who she was. She just never revealed the entire truth. Was that the wrong thing to do? I have asked myself that for 3 years, and I still don't have a simple answer. The people who knew about my money before they knew me always treated me differently. They looked at me as if I were a prize to be won, a fix for a problem they already had. Derek just looked at me like I was a person, a normal, sometimes difficult, and often stubborn person. I needed that. I needed to be someone's person before I became someone's financial opportunity. But now I have to wonder if I accidentally created a man who believed he married beneath him, who saw himself as the provider, who thought his wife was totally dependent on him, who thought she stopped herself. She was just sitting in her car in the driveway of the house they owned together. She had been there for 6 minutes. The garage door was still up. She could see the dusty spot where Derek stored his golf clubs and the shelf with half-empty paint cans from the remodel 2 years ago. She had paid for the renovation. He had picked out the design elements. It seemed like a balanced arrangement back then. She went inside. Derek was not expected home until 7, so she had plenty of time. She walked to the room she used as an office, the one Derek called her art room. He said it the way you would mention a child's playroom, with a kind of affection that was actually just condescension. She sat down at her desk, opened her laptop, and called Russell, this time on video. Russell Hart's face appeared on her screen. He was in his office on the 38th floor of a building in Midtown Manhattan. The office looked like the result of a tasteful disagreement between a library and a law firm where neither side really won, with bookshelves from floor to ceiling. His office had a mahogany desk from his mentor and 2 chairs Margot had only ever seen Russell use. He was 62, but appeared 55, having served as the Ellison family's top lawyer for 23 years. He knew her father, Theo, long before she did, and he often looked at her as if seeing a smaller version of him, a likeness that was both a comfort and a warning. "Tell me everything," he said. She explained the situation while he listened intently. Russell Hart possessed the cool composure of polished stone. His face showed nothing. When she was done, he asked, "How many weeks are you?" 31. "And the prenup," Margot stated. "I must know exactly what he gets if—" "I understand the if," Russell interrupted. He turned to a thick file on his desk that she guessed he kept current. "The simple answer is, not much," he began. "Your father was meticulous. The trust is separate property, and your assets from before the marriage are untouchable. Only the marital estate, what you acquired together, can be divided. But since our contributions are so unequal, what is the marital estate?" Margot questioned. "Primarily the house," Russell answered. "A few joint accounts Derek paid into, which you matched to keep up appearances. A car, some furnishings. And the house is worth what now? Around $1.2 million. You paid the down payment and for most of the renovations from your private account." "So," Margot began. "So," Russell continued, "in the most generous possible court ruling, Derek might leave with $200,000 or $300,000 and a vehicle." Margot's eyes drifted to a small painting in her art room. Her father purchased it in 1987 for $40,000. Its current value was a figure Russell occasionally mentioned, and she actively ignored. "And what if he knows about the trust?" she asked. "He does not," Russell said plainly. "But if—" Margot started. Russell met her gaze, his tone firm. "He signed a prenuptial agreement he never bothered to actually read. He cannot touch the Ellison Trust, the holdings, or your inheritance. His only claim is on the minimal assets you willingly shared with him, which by design is very little." She acknowledged this with a nod. "Now," Russell asked, "what is your plan?" "I need a week," she replied, for the party. I intend to go to the party." Russell just looked at her. "Russell," she insisted. "He's hosting a party on a rooftop for his lover while his pregnant wife is at home. I refuse to let that pass without a response." A deep silence settled in the room, the type Russell employed while weighing possibilities instead of feelings. "Should I be concerned?" he finally asked. "No," she assured him. "Nothing reckless, I just—" She paused, her gaze finding the painting again. "I need him to truly see me, just once, before this ends. I need him to know what he's losing." Russell contemplated her words. "Do you need me to make any arrangements?" "Yes," she confirmed. "I want you to make every public document about Ellison Holdings easy to find online. The press releases, that Forbes article from 2 years ago, the board statement after Dad's death, all of it." "Why?" "Because he will search for my name," Margot answered softly. "And I want him to find something." Then Russell delivered a line with his typical quiet delivery, a tone that could signal a seismic shift. "Margot," he began, "do you know that the Rosewood rooftop, the location for Saturday's event, belongs to a company in which the Ellison Trust holds a 43% share. She froze. To put it simply, he went on, Derek is renting a venue in a building your family is a major owner of. You have the power to void the booking. Margot was silent for a while. I don't want to void it, she finally said. No, Russell replied, a faint smile on his lips. I assumed you wouldn't. I want to be a guest, she declared. The rest of the afternoon was spent in her art room, not creating, but planning. She was compiling a list of logistics, not complaints. Just as her father always said, setting up the pieces before the first play. On Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, Margot played the part of a wife with perfect execution, but no feeling. Wednesday night, she cooked pasta with a sauce that simmered for 40 minutes, its aroma of garlic and basil filling the house. Derek arrived at 7:30, had 2 helpings, called it wonderful, and asked about her day. His attention was hollow. He was in the room, but his mind was somewhere else. On Thursday, she posed pointed questions about his job that demanded detailed replies. As he answered, she was struck by the deep weariness that comes from faking normalcy for so long you forget how real comfort feels. Friday morning brought her 31-week checkup. Dr. Caroline Merritt was a steady, exact physician who could discuss medical facts like a friendly chat instead of a lecture. She moved the cool probe across Margot's belly, studied the monitor, and announced that all was well. The baby's size was right on track, with a solid heartbeat and proper positioning. Lying there, Margot saw her daughter's heart beating on the screen and felt an unnamed emotion rise within her, something between sorrow and optimism. Back at home, she relayed the doctor's news to Derek, telling him the baby was perfect and healthy. Great, great, he mumbled, his eyes glued to his phone. She saw his distracted expression as he spoke. He never brought up the name they had picked out 2 months earlier, not once since they had settled on Eleanor. Eleanor Vivian Reeve. He participated in choosing it, then treated the matter as a finished chore, not the coming of a new life. She reined in her thoughts. She could fall apart later. For now, there was work to do. Thursday evening, Derek claimed he was going out for work drinks. He returned by 11. He carried the scent of pricey whiskey and a place she had never been to. She was reading in bed when he entered, and she feigned sleep. The act was second nature, something she'd mastered months ago without realizing it. Once his breathing became slow and steady next to her, she lay awake in the darkness, allowing herself to absorb the full burden. The anger could wait. She could sense it accumulating like a storm inside her chest. Tonight, she allowed the sadness to surface. The distinct sorrow for the marriage she thought she had, for the man she once adored, and for the countless ways she had shrunk herself, believing love meant being less. That wasn't love. It was damage control. After Derek was sound asleep on Thursday, Margot slipped out of bed. Downstairs, an overwhelming restlessness took hold of her. In the silent house, she was a storm of motion. She began to clean the whole first floor with the frantic intensity of someone who manages the tiny details because the big picture is out of her hands. She scrubbed countertops and straightened the pantry. At 7 months pregnant, she was on the floor with a toothbrush, scouring the grout between the kitchen tiles at 11 at night. It was absurd, and she knew it, but she couldn't make herself stop. When every surface was spotless, she drew a bath for no real reason. The tub filled because she had spent all her energy cleaning and was now completely empty. Without changing, she sat on the tub's rim in her jeans and a faded college sweatshirt, dipping her feet into the hot water. The pale green tiles of the bathroom were her choice. She had traveled 40 minutes to a special shop in Hoboken and searched for 2 hours to find them. They were the Preet's shade she had imagined, and she had cherished them since the day they were put in. The thought hit her. I will miss these tiles. And that was what finally broke her. It wasn't the party, the 14 months of messages, or the playlist with 47 songs. It wasn't the thought of Derek's hand on another woman's back. Those pains would be dealt with later. It was the tiles, the beautiful green tiles she had so deliberately selected for a room in a home she created with someone she trusted. She wept for the tiles and for all they stood for. Her tears were silent and methodical, a technique perfected at boarding school, where privacy was scarce. Afterward, she dried her eyes, emptied the tub, and returned to bed. And then there was Cassandra Whitmore, who merits her own mention. On Wednesday, Margot had done her research. Using discreet methods Russell had shown her long ago for a time she hoped would never come. Cassandra Whitmore was 29, from Columbus, Ohio, and worked as a marketing director for a real estate company similar to Derek's. They must have connected at a work event or through shared professional contacts. She had a tasteful Instagram filled with aspirational travel pictures and restaurant photos. Tagged images showed a close bond with her mother and two younger sisters. She held a master's in communications from Ohio State. In all her pictures, she looked genuinely happy. That was the part that got to Margot. I needed her to be a caricature. I needed her to be simple. I wanted her to be like the women in movies. So obviously wrong that you feel nothing complicated. But she seems like a real person. She looks like someone who either doesn't know she's the other woman, or she knows and believes her connection with Derek is special and real. Neither scenario made me feel any better. Both made me feel much worse. She didn't resent Cassandra Whitmore. She resented Derek for forcing her to even think about Cassandra Whitmore. I am not crazy. I know what I witnessed, and I know the difference between a man who stumbles into a situation and one who carefully constructs it. Derek built this entire thing. He purchased the tickets. He booked the reservations. He sent her tender texts telling her she deserved the world. He made a choice every single day for 14 months to continue this. That is not just a mistake. That is a whole other life. A secret life he was living right beside mine. On Thursday night, Derek came home for dinner. He was actually present, making that extra effort he always made when he was feeling a little guilty about something. She had documented this pattern for 3 years. He opened the bottle of wine without being asked. He followed up on a small detail she had mentioned days ago. He placed his phone, screen down on the table. Tonight, his phone was face down. "How are you doing?" he asked, for real. She stared at him across the table. The candlelight, the wine, the pasta she cooked, all part of the Thursday night show. "Honestly," she said, "I feel like I am standing on the edge of a cliff. Like my whole world is about to change." He nodded with a serious look. "Third trimester nerves," he said. "That is completely normal." She lifted her fork. "Yes," she replied. Something just like that. Later, over dessert, he refilled her water glass and said casually, "Oh, I have a client event on Saturday night. It is a huge deal. You would not want to come. It is all shop talk. You should invite Patrice over and have a relaxing night." He never made eye contact as he spoke. He was so practiced in this specific lie that it was no longer a performance to him. She just said, "Of course, have a wonderful time." She gave him a smile. He looked relieved. He has no idea what is coming for him. On Friday, she called her mother. Vivian Ellison heard the entire story without a single interruption. When Margot was done, Vivian just said, "I understand." "Is that it?" Margot asked. "What were you hoping I would say?" "I am not sure." Something. A moment of silence passed. "Your father would be furious," Vivian said with care, "but he would also remind you that anger is a form of energy. Energy needs to be focused, not squandered. I am focusing it, Margot assured her. I know, that is why I am not worried about you. After a pause, she asked, Are you coming to the party on Saturday? I need you to be there, Mom, Margot said. Not to get involved, just, I do not want to be by myself when it all goes down. The silence on the line was long, complex, and filled with a mother's unique love for her child. Just tell me the time, Vivian finally said, and what I should wear. Saturday at 8:17 in the morning, Margot put on the black Chanel dress. She stood before the mirror, 7 months pregnant. The empire waist and her pulled-back hair made the dress fit flawlessly. Patrice had impeccable taste. She studied her reflection for a long moment. Then she took out her phone and sent a text to Russell. We are ready. His reply came back in less than 3 seconds. The car has been arranged. I will be there soon. Then, because he had been in her life since she was 12, he added, Your father would be so proud. She set the phone down. Let's do this, she said to the woman in the mirror and to the baby already kicking inside. The Rosewood Hotel's rooftop was exactly as the text described. Strings of lights draped in elegant curves between iron posts. The city skyline shimmered in the distance during that perfect magic hour, painted in shades of amber and violet. It was the kind of lighting that made everything appear more valuable than it was, and sometimes more lovely. White tablecloths covered round tables that were placed around a small, polished dance floor. 3 bartenders moved with skill behind a pop-up bar stocked with Krug champagne and silver ice buckets. The smell of late summer jasmine drifted from planters set along the northern edge. Against the far wall was a huge floral display. It was an architectural waterfall of white and cream flowers that Margot, with 15 years of art procurement experience, estimated cost around $18,000, maybe more. About 50 guests in cocktail attire were already mingling when Margot walked in. She was not on the guest list. She did not have to be. Russell, a member of the Rosewood's private club since 2009 and whose name was on several key ownership documents for the building, had arranged her entry with a single call on Wednesday. He told her, Walk in like you own the place. In many ways, you do. Do not scan the crowd for him first. Do not look for her. Get a drink, stand near the edge, and let him discover you. She walked toward the bar. The young, sharp bartender glanced at her, then down at her belly, then back to her face with an expression of someone quickly adjusting their assumptions. Sparkling water, she said. Please. He served it in a champagne flute without her needing to ask. From a distance, it looked like she was part of the celebration. She found a spot near the northern edge of the rooftop. It offered the best view of the skyline. From there, she could see the entire party without turning her head. She waited for 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Then she spotted Derek. He was standing by the massive floral arrangement, talking with Graham Whitfield, his business partner for the last 6 years. Graham was laughing at a joke Derek had made. Derek was wearing a suit she had never seen before. It was new, expensive, and not from their shared closet. He looked more relaxed than he had in months. He seemed lighter, with the specific lightness of a man who has just set down a heavy weight. And she finally understood that the heavy thing was her. There it is. That is the truth I have been avoiding. He is not relieved to be free from work stress or anxiety about the baby. He is relieved to be away from me. In his world, I have become the chore. She, whoever she is to him, has become the prize. I am the weight, and she is the freedom. I have been someone's burden, and I never even knew it. She watched him for 2 full minutes without moving. He still had not noticed her. Then Cassandra appeared. She came up the inside staircase in a red dress that was truly breathtaking. She was laughing at something the woman next to her had said. The room did what rooms do when the guest of honor arrives. It shifted its focus. Conversations changed and heads turned. Derek turned. His expression, Margot noted instantly, was something she would analyze for a very long time. It was not exactly desire. It was more like pure relief. The kind of relief a person feels when they have been holding their breath and can finally let it out. He looked at Cassandra Whitmore the same way people look at something they have decided is worth, whatever it might cost. Cassandra was gorgeous. Margot acknowledged it like one acknowledges the weather. It was just a fact of the landscape. Derek walked over to her. He kissed her on the cheek, his hand resting on the small of her back. Her hand unconsciously went to her own pregnant belly. At 7 months, the baby gave a single, solid kick, as if to say, I am here. We are here. Do not you dare forget. She did not forget. Sad. Graham Whitfield was the first one to spot her. She saw the exact moment it clicked for him. First came confusion, then recognition, followed by the dawning terror of a man realizing what was about to unfold and having no clue where to run. He excused himself from Derek with a quick word and a nod, and then made his way towards her. Margot, he said. His voice was strained, like someone trying to speak carefully in a language he barely knew. I did not realize you were coming. Hello, Graham, she replied cheerfully. It is a beautiful party. Yes, he stammered, then changed his approach. Margot, I think perhaps, is there somewhere else I'm supposed to be? She inquired. He opened his mouth to speak, then shut it. I will assume that means no, she said. She took a slow sip of her sparkling water. Graham Whitfield backed away. 30 seconds later, she saw him lean in toward Derek. He whispered something very quietly. She observed Derek's face as he processed the words, saw the change happen, the frantic calculations starting behind his eyes. Derek turned his head and he saw her. He froze completely. It was the specific stillness of a man whose two separate worlds had just collided in the same physical location. His mind was racing, trying to solve the equation. Was this an accident? Was this a disaster? How much did she know? When did she learn about it? He immediately started walking toward her. She had to give him that. He did not hesitate. She watched him arrange his expression as he approached. By the time he reached her, he had managed a look of pleasant surprise. Margot, he said, what are you doing here? She looked right at him. I was invited, she replied. This is a hotel, Derek. Anyone is welcome in a hotel. She glanced around the rooftop. Twinkling lights, the scent of jasmine, and $18,000 in flowers. It was all quite beautiful. I asked him whose party it was. A tiny muscle in his jaw clenched. Over 3 years, I had learned to read his smallest expressions. That specific clinch always came before a carefully crafted lie. A colleague, he told me. It is a work event, just like I said. You said? It was for a client, I answered, keeping my voice light. Right. So what is this client's name? Silence. I let the quiet hang in the air. That was another thing I had learned. How to wait without speaking. Derek, I said, my voice perfectly steady. What is the client's name? He answered with nothing. In those 3 seconds, as the lights glowed and 50 people laughed just feet away, I felt a perfect, crystal clear calm. I was not angry or sad. For the first time in years, I felt completely settled. He took my arm, his grip firm but gentle, and guided me toward the elevators, away from the crowd. The polite mask had fallen from his face. This was the real him. Frightened and calculating. Beneath it all, there was a strange hint of relief. The confrontation he had dreaded was finally here. I can explain, he began. I know, I said. You do not need to. Margot, I found your phone Tuesday morning. I read the messages. The hallway was silent, except for the hum of the elevator. The party felt miles away. like muffled music from another world. I know about Cassandra, I told him. I know it has been 14 months. I know you told her she deserved the world. I paused, letting my words sink in. Our baby is 7 months along, Derek. You told her she deserved the world while I was at home growing your child. He had the decency to look like he had been physically struck. The color drained from his face. Margot, I am sorry. It is complicated. I know it got complicated, I said. Everything in life gets complicated. That is a fact, not an excuse. I love you, he said. I do. This is not. Do not, I said softly. Please do not do that. He fell silent. We are going to talk, I told him, but properly. Not here. On Monday, my attorney will contact your attorney. Until then, I am asking you not to come home. He just stared at me. I am going back to the party, I said. Why? He asked. I looked at the man I married, at his unfamiliar tie and expensive suit. I looked at the confusion on his face, the look of a man who never understood what he had. Because I am not the one who should have to leave, I said. Then I walked back to the rooftop. I got a glass of sparkling water from the same bartender and found a table near the edge overlooking the city. There I was, 7 months pregnant, at my husband's mistress's birthday party. And I felt a calm that was almost frightening. In my experience, that kind of calm always comes right before everything changes. But here's the part I did not tell anyone. I cried in the elevator on the way up, not in front of Derek, not in front of the guests or his friend Graham or the kind bartender. I cried alone in the elevator for the 43 seconds it took to get to the rooftop. I pressed my back against the mirror and let the tears fall silently. It was a skill I had mastered at boarding school, where the walls were paper thin. When the elevator doors opened, I simply stopped. I was very good at stopping. It was not always a good quality. Derek did not return to the rooftop. I learned this from Graham, who came to my table about 20 minutes later. He had the nervous energy of a man trying to defuse a bomb. He sat down with a glass of whiskey that he clearly needed. Margot, he said, abandoning whatever speech he had prepared. I want you to know I did not know about this for a long time, but eventually you did know, I said. There was a pause. I watched him make the choice to be honest. Yes, he finally admitted. And you did not tell me. No. I looked at him. Graham, I am not angry with you. I understand the position you are in. I just want you to know that I know. He nodded, looking miserable and grateful to be managed. Is there anything? He began. No, I said. Enjoy the party. He left. I sat alone for the next 35 minutes. My mother, Vivian, had texted that she was in the lobby. I waited with my water, the scent of jasmine, and the lights of the city spread out below me, completely unaware of what was happening up here. It turns out Cassandra noticed me. I learned this later. While I was sitting there, Cassandra Whitmore, 29 years old in a red dress, on her 30th birthday, started asking questions. She had seen Derek leave in a hurry. She had seen the pregnant woman sitting alone, the one Graham had been confessing to for 8 minutes. She asked Graham, who was having the worst night of his professional life. He told her enough, not everything, but enough. Cassandra spent the rest of her birthday party looking like a person who had just realized the story she was living had a very different ending. I am not sure how to feel about that. There is a small part of me, the part I am not proud of, that wanted her to be simple and foolish. That part of me is almost sorry for her. Almost, but not quite. Then Vivian arrived. My mother appeared at the entrance at 9:15. She was about 40 minutes late, which meant she had likely stopped for a drink, or to change her shoes, or both. At 62, Vivian Ellison was the kind of woman who entered a room and quietly became its center of gravity. You only noticed it after she was gone. She came right to my table, sat down, and looked at me. "Are you okay?" "No," I said. It was the first time I had admitted it out loud. Vivian placed her hand over mine on the table. She did not say a word. She did not offer solutions or her well-formed opinions about Derek's character. She just sat with me. She held my hand and let the silence do its work. Sometimes that is the only thing that helps. We sat together for a very long time while the party went on around us. Toasts were made, dinner was served, and someone played music that was both tasteful and too loud. The city lights sparkled as the sky turned completely dark. At 10:30 I said, "I want to go home." "Yes," Vivian said. "I want to go home, and I want to sleep, and I want to take this one day at a time." "Yes," Vivian said again. "That is exactly right." I drove myself home. I waved off the car Derek had arranged. I needed those 22 minutes by myself. I needed the specific quiet of driving at night, with the radio still on a station I had not touched in months. I got home at 11. I could not go into the bedroom. I tried. I stood in the doorway, looked at Derek's empty side of the bed, and walked away. I went to the nursery. It was the room I had put the most care into. The walls were a soft white that took 4 samples to get right. The crib was assembled, waiting. A small bookshelf held the first books I had bought. The glider chair was in the corner, where the morning light would be perfect. I sat in that glider and placed my hands on my stomach, 3 in the morning. This is not how it was supposed to be. I had a picture in my mind, not a perfect picture, but a true one. The 3 of us in this room learning to be a family. That picture is gone now. I am sitting here in the dark, trying to imagine what comes next. I kept myself small for a long time, not because I did not know my own strength, but because I wanted to be chosen for myself. The terrible irony is that I hid so much of myself trying to be genuinely chosen. In the end, the man who chose me chose a version of me that does not really exist. He chose a woman who needed him. I never needed him. I wanted him, which is completely different, and he would have never loved me if he had known the truth. I looked down at my stomach. I do not regret it. I regret some of my choices, but never you. Then the baby moved. It was a long, slow roll, not a sharp kick like on the rooftop. It was gentler. In the dark, silent nursery at 3 in the morning, it felt like an answer. It felt like company. It felt like someone else saying, "I am here. We are in this together." I stayed in that glider until the first hint of dawn appeared. Then I got up, made coffee, and drank it while it was still hot. On Sunday morning, Derek texted from a hotel. "I need to talk to you, please." I read it, put the phone down, then picked it up again. I typed 4 words. "Monday through our attorneys." Then I put the phone in a kitchen drawer and went to water my 17 plants. She watered each plant one by one. The task took 40 minutes, and she counted them like her grandmother counted rosary beads. It was not for prayer, but for the steady, careful rhythm of a simple act. That Monday at 10 o'clock, Russell Hart phoned Derek's lawyer, a capable but unremarkable man named Philip Crane. With the calm precision of someone who had never lost this type of argument, Russell laid out the facts. Margot Reeve, formerly Ellison, was ready to dissolve the marriage. The prenup was unbreakable. The shared assets were much less than Derek likely imagined, as most funds came from a trust that was her separate property. If he contested the divorce, certain private details about the Ellison family business would become public. Philip Crane called back in 45 minutes. Derek, he said, had a few questions. Russell shared the details with Margot on the phone. "What did you say about Ellison Holdings?" she asked. "I said it was a private family trust and he should have read the prenup more closely." Margot paused. "How did he react?" His lawyer said, and this is a direct quote, "My client needs 24 hours." "He can have 24 hours," Margot replied, and ended the call. She sat at her art room desk. Outside, the September light felt cooler than August, less demanding. Summer was ending. At 2:15 that afternoon, her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She nearly ignored it, due to a small superstition she could not shake, even after 31 years. But she answered. "Margot?" The voice was cautious and a little raw, like someone who had not slept well. This is Cassandra Whitmore. How I got your number is not important. I am sorry. I can just hang up." Margot stayed silent, just absorbing the sound of Cassandra Whitmore's voice. "Don't hang up," she said after a moment. There was a pause. "I wanted to say I am sorry," Cassandra said. "That is the only reason I called. I know it might not change anything, but I needed you to hear it from me." "Okay," Margot said. "He told me," Cassandra explained, "that your marriage had ended, that you had both agreed to split up and were just working out the details. That is what he said from day one. That is what—" her voice cracked. "What I believed." Margot said nothing. "I know that sounds like what every other woman would say," Cassandra went on, her tone strained. "I know how it sounds, but I need you to know I would never— if I knew you were pregnant, if I knew about the baby." Her voice shattered completely. "I am so sorry." I believe her, Margot thought. I hate that I do, because it would be simpler not to. But I can tell the difference between an act and an awakening. This is an awakening. She is not calling to make excuses. She is calling because she has been awake since Saturday, understanding the man she loved is a man who would lie to her, just like he lied to me. The same person fooled both of us. It does not make us friends, but it makes us connected. "Cassandra," Margot said gently, "did he ever discuss his finances with you? What he owned or earned?" A brief silence. "He talked about his business deals, his real estate work. He once said his wife had family money that helped with the house." Margot took this in. "Did he say the family's name?" "No," Cassandra replied. "He really did not tell you." "Tell me what?" "Nothing," Margot said. "Nothing important for now." "Cassandra, thank you for making this call. I truly mean that." "Can I do anything to help?" Cassandra asked. "Actually," Margot said, thinking, "there might be something." She called Patrice right after, sitting in her art room where the afternoon sun made the colors of the Diebenkorn painting glow. Her father had adored that painting, once standing before it for 20 silent minutes, the stillest she had ever seen him. She explained the call to Patrice, who was quiet for so long, Margot wondered if they had been disconnected. "You are not going to play the saint, forgive him, and just take all the pain, are you?" Patrice finally asked. "No," Margot said. "I am done taking it." "Good. What is your plan?" "I am going to make sure Derek understands exactly what he lost," she said. "And I want the whole world to see it." She spoke the words into the silence of the room, as if saying it aloud would make it true. "Somewhere, I shrank myself to make him feel large. I am done being small." At 3 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, Derek arrived. He had called ahead. He had at least that much decency. He wanted to talk. Just the two of them. No lawyers. She agreed, because he needed to see everything clearly. It was not about being cruel or getting revenge. He just needed to grasp the true scale of what he had thrown away. He showed up looking awful. 2 nights in a hotel, whatever Cassandra told him, and the phone call from Russell had completely changed his view of the world. He looked like a man who had been crunching numbers and hated the final answer every time. He sat at the kitchen table, and she sat opposite him. "Tell me what you want," he said, using a placating tone she had never heard from him. It confirmed he already knew he had lost. "First, there is something you need to understand," she said, "before we discuss what I want." "Okay." She took a deep breath. "When we first met," she began, "I was running a sort of test. I wanted to know if someone could love me without knowing about my family. That is important to me. It has always been important. My father ensured that I would never have to think about money, not once in my life, and all I ever really wanted was besatz, to be loved by a person who did not know about the money." Derek sat completely motionless. "You passed that test," she said softly. "For a time. Margot?" "I am not done," she stated. He fell silent. "You passed the test, but then you stopped seeing me. You saw the lifestyle, not the person. I just became part of the background. And while I was becoming furniture in my own house, you found another woman who saw you as special. I get that, I really do. But what you did, throwing a huge, expensive party while I was home, 7 months pregnant with our child, that is not a simple mistake. It is a choice you remade every single day for 14 months. He offered no defense. The man who for 3 years had dismissed her concerns and called her crazy had nothing to say. "I know," he whispered. "Do you know who owns that building with the rooftop bar?" she asked. He blinked. "The Rosewood? The hotel? I... No," he stammered. She told him, watching his expression change as the truth sank in. This was the moment she had quietly prepared for all week. It was not for revenge. It was so he would finally see the entire picture, the reality of what he had called boring and thrown away. His expression shifted through emotions she could not name. She saw the realization hit him. The woman he saw as a supporting role in his life had actually been writing the entire story. "How much?" he began. "It does not matter," she cut in. "That is the whole point. The amount of money is irrelevant. What is important is that I am a complete person, with a family, a past, and a life that is huge and real. I have been hiding in the shadows of my own existence because I was scared of being seen as more than just your wife, and I am so much more. I always have been." At the very end, he asked if there was any chance for them at all. She genuinely considered it. She gave the question the 3 full seconds it was worth. "No," she said. "I do not think so." The surprising part was the absence of sadness as she spoke. She simply felt honest. As September began, Margot tackled each day with the focus of a woman no longer wasting time on sadness. All that energy was now aimed at building, not breaking. The breaking part was already done. In elevators, bathtubs, and the baby's room at 3 in the morning. Now it was time for construction. She was designing her future life with the same careful, patient, and clear vision she used to collect art. Because the prenup was ironclad, the divorce moved much more quickly than most. Derek's lawyer returned within the 24-hour deadline with 3 different offers. Russell turned down every one with a firm politeness that signaled there was nothing left to discuss. In the end, Derek walked away with his car, his personal things, 2 shared bank accounts with his own money in them, and a single payment that Margot's lawyers correctly called generous, considering his weak legal standing. He signed without a fight. Margot guessed why, and Patrice, who always found out everything, later confirmed it. I figured Derek must have told Cassandra about our talk. After hearing my name, she likely looked it up online and showed him everything. The magazine features, the company announcements, the charity that carried my grandfather's name. She saw the complete picture. I wondered for a moment how that felt, but I didn't linger on it. Let me be very clear in my own mind. This is not a victory. This is not what winning feels like. Winning would have been a successful marriage. This is just about finding my footing. This is me landing safely on my own 2 feet. And I am well aware that not every woman in my shoes lands so softly. Some are truly lost. They have no one to turn to, no legal champion, no personal savings, and no second home. I think about those women constantly now. I am not separate from them. I simply had a softer place to land. That is not a virtue. That is just luck and family money. I work hard to remember that difference. The movers came for Derek's belongings on a Wednesday. He arrived with the moving crew. I did not watch them from the window. Instead, I made some tea and sat in the art room with a book. I listened to the sounds of drawers sliding open, boxes being moved, and the front door opening and closing, over and over until it was silent. That evening, I started rearranging my closet. It was 2 in the morning, I was 33 weeks pregnant, and I was reorganizing everything in the dark with just one small lamp on. Derek's side was now bare. I stood there for a second, just looking at all that empty space. Then, I began to move my things with a slow and steady purpose. I spread my clothes out, filling the entire closet. I shifted every single item I had, one hanger at a time, then another. I continued until my side and his side blended into one. The whole closet was simply mine. There were no longer 2 separate halves of anything. I stepped back to look at my work. I had been squeezed into half of my own closet for 3 years. Now I expanded to fill the whole space, like a plant reaching for the sun, like something finally returning to its proper size after being confined for far too long. On a Thursday morning, Derek's mother called me. Nora Reeve was 64 years old. For 30 years, she had been the type of mother who saw her son for who he was and chose to love him despite it. That was something to admire. But she sometimes used that love like a weapon, which was not so admirable. I had been expecting her call and had already made my peace with it. "Margot," Nora said. Her voice sounded like a woman who had practiced her speech several times, but was now deciding to just speak from the heart. "I need you to know that I am aware of what he did." "Okay," I replied. "I am not calling to excuse him. He does not deserve to be defended." "Okay. I am calling because," she paused, the kind of pause a person takes when they are searching for truly honest words, "because I love that baby. That baby is my grandchild, no matter what Derek did, and I am asking you, as one woman to another, to please allow me to be a part of her life." I was silent for a few seconds. "Nora," I said at last, "I was never going to keep her away from you. That was never even a consideration." There was a long silence. "Really?" Nora asked. "She's going to need every single person who loves her," I told her. "I am not going to shorten that list because of what her father did." When Nora spoke again, her voice sounded different. It had lost the tension of a woman who was braced for a difficult conversation. "He did not deserve you," she said softly. "I know," I answered, "but he gave me her, so I cannot be completely regretful." Cassandra did something I had never asked her to do. In the second week of September, she sent a voluntary statement to Derek's lawyer. She confirmed the timeline of their relationship just as she had known it. She included the exact things Derek had told her, that his marriage was finished, that we were getting a divorce, that he was available. This statement was her own idea. It was not required by law. since the prenuptial agreement handled all the details. But it was the truth, and having it on the record seemed to matter. Why did she do that? Patrice asked me. Because she needed to stop being a part of it anymore, I said slowly. Even if it was accidental. She needed the truth to be recorded somewhere other than inside her own mind. Do you feel sorry for her? I thought about that for a moment. I feel connected to her, I said. It is like we were both characters in the same story, and neither one of us was the author. I deserve so much better than this. Not because of my background or my finances, but because of the person I am. I deserved a partner who wanted to see all of me, every single piece, the big things and the small things, the inheritance and the woman who is a complete person without it. I'm going to teach my daughter to know this about herself, so she does not have to learn it the hard way. So she knows her worth before someone who is supposed to love her makes her feel like she has to earn it. In late September, at 37 weeks, Dr. Caroline Merritt slid the cold probe over my stomach. She looked at the monitor and said, "It could be any day now." I drove home from that appointment by myself. I had people to support me, Vivian, Patrice, Stu, and even Russell in his own way. But I wanted that drive for myself. Just 22 minutes of me, the radio, and the city passing by. I stopped at a red light on Riverside and finally put a name to the feeling I had been having for weeks. I had thought it was worry. I had thought it was tiredness. I had even thought it was just a different kind of sadness. But it was relief. It was not happiness. Not yet, but it was relief. It is the kind of relief you feel when something that was bound to break finally does, and you discover the ground is still solid beneath your feet. The ground was still there. I was standing on it. The light changed to green, and I drove home. Eleanor Vivian Reeve was born on October 1st at 4:57 in the morning. It was after 14 hours of labor that Patrice later described as both heroic and extremely loud. She was right about both. The hospital room had a mixed smell of disinfectant and fresh flowers. Vivian had brought roses from her garden, wrapped in simple brown paper. Outside the window, the night sky had the special kind of darkness that appears just before sunrise. When the day is about to begin, Vivian was in the waiting room and had been there since midnight. Russell Hart sent flowers, 3 dozen white peonies. He had excellent taste and had known me long enough to know what I liked. The card simply read, "Welcome, Miss Eleanor. The board is going to love you." Derek was not there. This was my decision. I had told him clearly and kindly. When my labor started, I sent him a text message. "I am at St. Mary's. The baby is on her way. I will send pictures." He replied almost instantly, "Please let me come." I wrote back, "Not today. She will know you. She will have you as a part of her life, but today belongs to me." He honored my wish. At 4:58, Dr. Caroline Merritt laid Eleanor on my chest. She was 8 pounds, 1 ounce, was, with dark hair and huge wide eyes that already seemed to be studying the entire room, the lights, the noises, the person holding her. "Hi," I whispered. Eleanor just looked at me. I thought I would feel a lot of things in that moment. I thought I would feel love, but love is just an idea until it becomes real. And when it becomes real, it is so much bigger than the word. I thought I might feel scared. I even thought I might feel sad for the life I had once imagined, with Derek in the chair, the 3 of us together. But I did not feel any of that. I did not expect to feel this. I did not expect to feel whole. It was as if my entire life had been a journey to this exact moment. Not the marriage, or the money, or my job, or my art, or the big house. None of it. Just this. Just her. Right here and now. This is what I had been moving toward all along. I held my daughter for a very long time, as the world in the room buzzed around us. Nurses came in and out. Dr. Caroline Merritt checked her charts, wrote some notes, and gave me the quiet, professional smile of a person who had done this 1,000 times, but still knew that for the woman in the bed, it was the only time that mattered. At some point, Vivian came into the room. Vivian Ellison, a woman who never cried, at parties or funerals or will readings, or even at her own husband's memorial service, stood in the doorway of the hospital room. She looked at her daughter holding her granddaughter, and she began to cry. Not a quiet, polite cry, but a real one. The kind of cry that had been waiting for the perfect moment to be released. "She looks just like your father," Vivian said. "I know," I replied. "He would have—" "I know," I said again. We both sat with that thought for a moment. We felt the sadness of it and the beauty of it, and we understood how those two feelings were exactly the same thing. 6 days after Eleanor was born, I was back home. I was standing at the kitchen island. The morning sun was coming through the window over the sink. It was the same window, the same light, and the same kitchen where I had stood just 7 weeks earlier with a glass of water that I never even drank. She held a phone that was not hers and a future that was quietly falling apart. With one hand, she made coffee, while Eleanor slept in the carrier on her chest. Technically, it was too soon for the carrier, but Dr. Caroline Merritt had given her a knowing nod. She knew Margot would do it anyway. Eleanor's mouth was slightly open, her tiny hands curled near her chin. Margot recalled the last time she stood in this spot, with a summer playlist on and a text that said, "You deserve the world." She looked down at her daughter. "We are going to be okay," she said softly. "We will be more than okay. We will be who we were always meant to be." Eleanor slept on. The coffee finished brewing, and sunlight filled the kitchen. She checked her phone just once. A text from Patrice asked how they were. A missed call from Vivian, an email from Russell about fourth quarter board notes. She set the phone down and poured her coffee. She drank it while it was still hot. She realized this was the first time in months she had managed that, to drink her coffee while it was still warm. It felt like a small victory, but it was not small at all. A month after Eleanor was born, the Forbes article came out. It was not about Margot directly, as she had never been one for publicity. The feature was on Ellison Holdings and its major philanthropic gift. The Theo Ellison Foundation was funding a women's entrepreneurship center at Whitmore College, Margot's alma mater. The article was 6 pages long. It had a photo of Vivian, Margot, and Eleanor, who was only 3 weeks old and completely uninterested. The piece identified Margot as the controlling trustee of Ellison Holdings, the daughter of the late Theodore Ellison, and the mind behind the foundation's new direction. She read it at her kitchen table, with Eleanor in a bassinet beside her. In the clear morning light, she did not feel triumphant. She felt understood. She felt seen for who she really was. "This is who I am," she thought, "not what I have, but who I am." For 3 years, I was Derek's wife. That was real, something I chose and believed in and mourned. But I was also this person, underneath it all. I was always Theo's daughter, Vivian's daughter, and now Eleanor's mother. I have always been a woman who knew exactly who she was, even when I let others persuade me I was someone else. That part of my life is over now. I am done being persuaded. Derek sent a text when the article was published. Seeing his name on her screen, she took a steadying breath and opened it. I saw the article. I had no idea. I knew about the family money, but not the extent of it. "Margot, I am so sorry. I know that is not enough, but I am sorry." She read his words twice. Then she replied, "Take care of yourself, Derek, and be good to her. She deserves the father she can rely on." She hit send, put her phone away, and picked up her daughter. That chapter was officially closed. She had strong feelings about the light that streamed through the nursery window. She had feelings about the temperature of her bath, the songs Margot hummed at 2 in the morning, and how the carrier strap sometimes touched her cheek. At just 6 weeks old, Eleanor was completely her own person. It was the most incredible thing Margot had ever seen. She had witnessed plenty of incredible things. She had bought art that left people breathless. She had been to auctions where one item sold for more than most people make in 20 lifetimes. She had stood among brilliance and beauty and the profound weight of human creativity. None of it came close to watching her daughter realize she had opinions. For Thanksgiving, they were at the Connecticut house. Not the small garden house, but the main house. It was the one Margot had avoided since her father passed away because it felt too big, too empty, and too much like him. But in September, she had decided it was time to go back. Not to change it, but to live in it. She wanted to fill it with new life and new memories. Vivian was already there and had been for 3 days, busy reorganizing the kitchen. Her changes were definite improvements, but also quiet declarations of support. Patrice and her husband, James, were there with their 2 kids who had immediately explored every corner of the house, including 2 rooms that had been locked for years. Patrice was apologetic, but Vivian was thrilled. Russell stopped by for the meal and left before dessert, which was typical of him. He had 2 helpings of everything and held Eleanor for exactly 11 minutes, while having what looked like a very serious business discussion with her. That was also typical of Russell. Dr. Caroline Merritt had been invited, but sent beautiful flowers instead. The kind that arrive in unique vases. Nora Reeve was also there. This was Margot's decision, made with careful thought. She had considered it from every angle and always reached the same conclusion. She watched Nora in a chair by the window, holding Eleanor and singing a soft, unfamiliar song. It might have been a song from Derek's childhood. She was Eleanor's grandmother. She deserved to be that. Derek's actions were his own to answer for. Nora's love for this baby was genuine, and it belonged to Eleanor, not to Margot's pain. Margot knew enough to see the difference. Patrice came up beside her, holding a glass of wine she had been sipping for 2 hours. "You know," Patrice said, "most people in your shoes are still a mess 6 weeks after giving birth." "I had my moments," Margot replied. "I cried in an elevator, a bathtub, and the nursery at 3 in the morning. The classic Ellison way. We are very efficient." Patrice smiled. Then she asked the question she had been waiting to ask. "Are you happy?" Margot looked at her friend and gave the question the honest thought it deserved. Her father had taught her to think through important things, to look past the easy answers. "I am getting there," she said. "It is not a straight path. Some mornings, I make coffee and feel perfectly fine. Other mornings, I make coffee, and I miss the future I imagined for us, the one I truly believed in." "You're allowed to," Patrice affirmed. "Yes," Margot replied, "I know. I am finally letting myself feel it." Later that evening, with the kids in bed, James cheerfully tackled the dishes, a man comfortable in his domestic skills. Vivian and Nora, after a second glass of excellent Burgundy, found a surprising holiday truce. Margot carried Eleanor to her father's study, the one room she had actively avoided. It still held his scent, his books, the specific pipe tobacco he quit 20 years before his death that still clung to the room, and the furniture polish she could not bear to replace. She settled into his chair, holding Eleanor close. She spoke to her father, her words just a whisper, the way you speak to the departed when you have something vital to say. "Dad, I found the wall. You always told me I would face a wall, a point where I had to choose, a choice between what is comfortable and what is right. I found it. I made it to the other side. I am bruised, but I am through." Eleanor sighed, a soft sound she always made as she drifted off, a sound of pure safety, untouched by the world's heavy burdens. "I know what I am taking with me from this. Not the grudges or the fury. I will not carry that weight. Not the what-ifs. What I am keeping is the lesson. I now know that I deserve to be completely seen. Playing small was never about safety. It was just insecurity dressed up as logic. The one person who should have seen me made a choice not to. That is a horrible thing, and it is also over. On the other side of that pain, I have learned that I am the kind of person who finds her feet, and I will dedicate my life to making sure she knows she is too." Eleanor was sound asleep, a warm, solid weight of total trust on Margot's chest. That was the revelation. The cell door was never locked. I was just so focused on shrinking myself that I never saw it was wide open. She decided to write a letter to Cassandra. For a week, she did not send it. She drafted it, read it, tucked it away, then took it out again. She saw it was not about forgiveness for either of them. She rewrote the letter for what it truly was, an acknowledgement. "Dear Cassandra, we were both unaware of different truths. You did not know the real me, and I did not know the real him. I wish for you someone who is honest from the very start. I hope you find a person who cherishes you openly, not in secret. You earned that. So did I. We both did." She sent the letter and never got a reply. She did not need one. By January, Eleanor was 3 months old and had blossomed into a little person. She now had a distinct laugh and a particular gaze for strangers, thoughtful, assessing, but kind. It was so much like Theo Ellison that it made Vivian weep to see it. Margot returned to her career, part-time and on her own terms. She had the unique liberty of a person who works for passion, not necessity. Her first project was a small acquisition handling the sale of a private collection with major art pieces. Exactly her area of expertise. She met the family's agent on a Tuesday morning in a plain office that had nice lighting, terrible coffee, and the scent of old documents that meant business. She outlined her strategy, her background, and her professional judgment. She spoke with the solid assurance of a woman with 15 years of experience who knew her own value. After the meeting, the agent stood to shake her hand. "You are very impressive," he told her. "Thank you," Margot replied, and it was entirely genuine. It was not a performance or the rehearsed humility she had hidden behind for nearly a decade. She said it just as her father would have. Straightforward and without excuse. "Thank you." "Yes, I am." In her car, she called Patrice. "I got the project." "I am absolutely shocked," Patrice deadpanned. "Completely floored." "Stop being obnoxious," Margot said. "Never. This achievement calls for maximum obnoxiousness." Margot let out a real laugh, one that was not planned or adjusted for an audience. It was deep and authentic and utterly free. She headed home. Eleanor was with Vivian, who was performing a grandmother audit of the nursery's library. This guaranteed at least 6 new books would appear on the shelf. All from a small Greenwich bookstore, Vivian had her convictions, including 22 years of unwavering support for that specific shop. The January sun slanted through the windshield. It was a different light from August. Unlike the harsh golden glare of that morning 7 months prior, when her life had unraveled while she stood at her kitchen island with an untouched glass of water. All it took was 11 minutes of reading. This winter light was softer, lower in the sky, the kind of light from a season that is confident and unapologetic. It was not blinding, it was simply what it was. It was just light. Enough light to see the way ahead. She pulled into the driveway and paused. It was not the frozen stillness of August, the paralysis that kept her from going inside. This was just a breath, a moment, the normal space between what was and what is next. It was the beat before opening the door to the life she was creating. She remembered the woman at the kitchen island 7 months ago, barefoot, with her water, a playlist, and 4 words on a screen that held a secret as vast as a country. She thought about what that woman did not understand then, and what she understood now. I am the kind of person who finds her feet. I always have been. I just lost sight of it. I allowed another person's small view of me to define my own limits. I am finished with those limits. I am finished with playing small. Now, I am the whole person. All of it. The success, the art, the faith, the heartbreak, the sorrow, the daughter, the mother, and the woman who drove 40 minutes for pale green tiles because she knew her own mind. I am all of that, and I am going inside. She opened the door and went in. As it shut behind her, she heard Vivian reading from the nursery. Her tone was the one she reserved for books she endorsed, a bit too grave, which made it completely heartfelt. Eleanor was making her quiet, listening sounds. Margot dropped her keys on the console table. She moved toward the sounds, toward her life. Eleanor, Vivian Reeve, was raised with the certainty that she was loved. She was raised knowing her name and its history. She was raised in a home with pale green bathroom tiles, a small piece of art on the wall, and a grandmother whose serious voice showed how much books mattered. She was raised knowing that her mother had once stood perfectly still in a kitchen and made a decision, and that decision was her. This story was thoughtfully researched, written, and edited by our creative team. We developed it with purpose and shaped it with care, hoping to give you a meaningful and true emotional experience with a message you can take with you. We appreciate you spending your time with us. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories with valuable life lessons. Every narrative is crafted to entertain, inspire, and empower our audience. We believe that great stories can change lives, and we are committed to bringing you content that matters. Thank you for being part of our community.